good news is there's no reports of any injuries, but I want you to take a look at this massive tree. We're told that this was probably about 200 years old, one of several that has fallen here on the Stark family's property. You can see it has fallen here in their yard, coming very close to their house, and as we walk over here, you're going to actually see that it fell, another tree fell onto their house. There was no one in this back bedroom when it happened. I'm going to talk to the Stark family daughter right now, Tiffany Boone. She lives right next door, and she heard this tornado come through. This was about 5:20 this morning?
Yeah, it was about 5:15 this morning when we started to hear the wind picking up and things started hitting the side of the house I live next door.
Sharon, crews have been out here trying to clean up these trees all day long. You see these still laying here? They're not really a major priority. These are pretty small compared to some of the ones that we saw today, including one that fell on the Stark family house. It stood for about 200 years until that tornado came through about 5:20 this morning. The sight of a tornado's wake left Tiffany Boone and her mother Phyllis Stark with nearly the same reaction.
Holy moly.
Holy camole.
They lived side by side and heard the tornado roar through their family farm.
And I heard the train sound coming through.
Boone brought in a stranger driving by. The storm stopped him in his tracks.
He actually saw the tornado and explained it as being green and twirling in front of him, and it really scared him pretty bad.
The tornado left destruction at nearby properties along its 1-mile-long path, damaging 2 homes and several barns and sheds. But most of the damage centered on the Starks' land.
I heard like the train, and then I felt a crash, and I could smell the fresh air, and I knew the tree had come in the house.
Had the tree fallen Friday night, Boone's 10-year-old son would have been sleeping in that room as he visited his grandparents.
Thankfully, it was a Thursday night, not a Friday night, because tonight he would have been in there, and that we would be talking a whole nother story right now.
The tree fell on the oldest part of this 1921 home.
I've lived here for 48 years, and my husband was born here. He's 75, so he's been here since he was born, and I've been here for 48.
Does that make this even tougher?
Yeah, but we'll get it fixed. It's a material thing, so we'll get it fixed. So we're not going anywhere.
And you see the path coming from the house here. The National Weather Service says that this was an EF1 tornado. It reached maximum speeds of 95 miles per hour and was on the ground for about a minute, causing all of this damage. Live in Granville County, Justin Quesinberry, CBS North Carolina. Well, Sean and Sharon, the smell is still in the air here this evening, and you can see on the ground ashes covering the pavement out here. Firefighters also still on the scene. So many people today are amazed and grateful that no one was killed. The fire started around 10 o'clock last night and spread into a massive blaze due to the wooden structure. This is what remains of the apartment complex under construction. At one point during the fire, a crane used on site fell. Today we saw part of it resting on top of a neighboring building. Heat and water damaged several other buildings but did not cause any structural damage, we're told. Paramedics treated 5 people for smoke inhalation. The fire injured 1 firefighter, and the chief says it's minor. More than 100 firefighters fought the fire, which took more than 3 hours to get under control.
It's all wooden construction, so the fire spread really fast, and the wood the structure just started crumbling and just fell down all in front of us.
Some people who live in those buildings are now displaced. The Red Cross says people in about 70 apartments are affected. A shelter is now set up for them. The fire chief expects that crews will stay out here to put out hot spots through much of the night, and they continue to investigate what exactly caused this fire. We've also learned that the ATF is now part of the investigation. The damage to that structure is estimated at $12 million. Live in Raleigh, Justin Quesinberry, CBS North Carolina. Much to read about here now, too, because the paper was just delivered. Trump wins is your headline there. I'm here with Don Griffin. And tell me your thoughts when you heard the news.
Well, I also felt like I knew it this morning when I woke up.
Joseph voted in this election for the very first time, voted for Donald Trump. Why?
He's the man for the job. He's going to bring work here.
What about his candidacy brought you to the poll for the first time?
Well, like I said, he's the man for the job. He's going to bring work here, and he's for the people.
When you saw Donald Trump speak, he is president-elect of the United States. What did you think?
I don't think I've figured it out yet.
So you mentioned that you got to see part of his speech. One person that we haven't heard from yet is Hillary Clinton. Another person, Barack Obama. Certainly a lot of people would be interested to hear what they have to say this morning, and we anticipate that that will happen. We're joined now by Associate Professor of Law from Campbell University, Amos Jones. What do we need to hear from Barack Obama, from Hillary Clinton, from some of these other Democrats today?
Secretary Clinton left her supporters sobbing and expecting to return with maybe some returns in her favor.
Oh, yeah, the conversations have started here. I'm here with Leonard Hunter. They know him around here as Hawk. You don't want to say exactly who you voted for, but give me your reaction this morning.
My reaction was, I thought he would win. I'm waiting.
And you said that you thought that he would win. A lot of polls, though, however, said that Hillary Clinton looked like she was going to win. I want to bring in right now Associate Professor of Law from Campbell University, Amos Jones. And tell me why you think that these polls were not accurate.
Well, what happened was a perfect storm. There's no poll like the vote.
All right, well, thank you so much for being with us. And, of course, we'll continue to stay here, hear what people have to say throughout the morning. Live in Raleigh, Justin Quesinberry, CBS North Carolina.
The first person he met was Truman. He just had prayer with him.
Billy Graham's first trip to the White House in 1950 could have been his last. Unfamiliar with the protocol, Reverend Graham answered press questions about that meeting and posed for a photo kneeling on the White House lawn. A few days later, according to the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, a columnist quoted President Truman as saying Billy Graham was a, quote, persona non grata at the White House. Reverend Graham said the situation taught him a great lesson, and it was something Truman and Graham could laugh about years later, and Graham became a familiar face over the decades at the White House, no matter who lived there.
Your father has met with 12 sitting U.S. presidents. How did he have that type of close advisor role to so many presidents across party lines over such a long period of time?
Well, first of all, the politicians are, for the most part, self-serving. They saw that Billy Graham attracted a large crowd, and they wanted to be seen with him. It wasn't so much that my father wanted to be with them. They sought him out.
Especially in times of trouble, such as President Johnson during Vietnam.
He sought my father's counsel, wanted his prayer, wanted his friendship during that time.
He's been called America's pastor. What do you think led people to see him in that way?
Well, because in times of trouble, I think when the World Trade Centers came down, he was asked to come by President Bush to speak to the nation from the Washington Cathedral.
This event can give a message of hope, hope for the present and hope for the future. Yes, there is hope.
When George Bush's father, when we invaded Kuwait before the first Gulf War, he asked my father to come and to pray in Washington before the battle began the next morning.
Franklin Graham says his father was there for those national tragedies and personal difficulties.
All of them, he had a relationship, but it was prayer. He'd pray with them. I think Nixon, he was the closest, and I think when he heard those tapes that there was another side to Nixon, he was so disappointed because he didn't know that Nixon used that kind of language, didn't know that Nixon had that other side to his life. My father, when a person was in trouble, he didn't run away from him. He got even closer to him.
The trouble with the Nixon tapes involved Reverend Graham as well. The two were heard talking about people of the Jewish faith.
Well, I think that, first of all, the tapes were, I think, misunderstood. And I don't think there really, in my opinion, there wasn't a controversy. But people wanted to make it, try to make it sound like a controversy, but I don't think it was. My father was being honest in his opinions with the president and thought they were private.
From private moments to the most public. According to the Billy Graham Library, going back to President Eisenhower's inauguration in 1953, Reverend Graham participated in ceremonies and services for 7 inaugurations for both Democrats and Republicans. In 2007, 3 former presidents, Carter, Bush, and Clinton, were there at Reverend Graham's own big moment, the dedication of his library in Charlotte, which showcases his lifelong ministry in a very public career, one that never included a run at politics.
Well, he was even asked once if he would consider running for president. And my father said that would be taking a step backwards for him because he was an ambassador for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords.
Reverend Graham met with a total of 12 U.S. presidents, from Truman to Obama, who visited Reverend Graham at his Montreat home in 2010. Even before the 2016 election of Obama's successor, Franklin Graham knew his father's health would prevent him from meeting with another sitting U.S. president.
No, that's not going to happen anymore.
But the continuity that began with the 33rd president continues, in a way, with the 45th.
He knows Donald Trump quite well.
In 2013, Trump attended Reverend Graham's 95th birthday celebration in Asheville.
Of course, we had no clue that Donald Trump would be running for president. I don't think he knew at that time.
I read that your father once said, when speaking about presidents, we sometimes forget the loneliest people in the world are those who are constantly in the public eye. They have spiritual needs just like everyone else. How did that apply to your father, you think?
Well, I think my father, his retreat was when he came home and he got back into the woods. And the cameras were off, and that's where he could relax.
Justin Quesinberry, CBS North Carolina.